A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For this session, we have an eminent speaker, Professor Veena Tandon, Padma Shri. She is a NASI Senior Scientist Platinum Jubilee Fellow, formerly Professor of Zoology, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, Meghalaya. And we have with us Chairperson, Teachers of Teacher, Professor G.C. Upadhyay, ex-Head of Department of Microbiology, GSPM Medical College, and Dr. Ashwini Uttam, if he is here. Dr. Ashwini. He's a neurologist from Kanpur. So I welcome you, ma'am. She'll be speaking on emerging worm-borne zoonoses, health concerns and challenges in India. So I request you, ma'am, to kindly take over the dais, start the session.
The select audience present here, I feel a little guilty that expecting a good number of audience soon after lunch is perhaps criminal on my part. I also wish that this post-lunch session, it would have been better if organized in the dining hall itself. Anyway, at the very outset, I'm thankful to the organizing committee and through the organizing committee to Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Nilima Gupta, who happens to be a very good friend and a fellow parasitologist. I have chosen to speak about emerging worm zoonoses, health concerns. Where is the slideshow? इसको सेट तो कर दीजिए. In present day circumstances, a statement made sometime 70 years ago, more than 70 years ago, stands still true. More than a third of the world's population is infected with worms. You may be familiar with the common roundworm or tapeworms. So it is that category of parasites which cause many debilitating effects on the health of human beings. Many of these infections, which are common to animals, are also equally well represented in human beings as well. The diseases caused by them are categorized as zoonoses. If I define, zoonosis is an infectious disease in animals that can be transmitted to people. In nature, the reservoirs for these infectious agents is an animal, which could be rat, hare, insects, fish, cattle, or even carnivores like cats and dogs. If we look at Indian scenario, there are many parasitic infections which come under the category of zoonosis. Ascariasis or roundworm infections or hookworm infections or whipworm infections, cysticercosis and cystic echinococcus, hydatid disease, you may be familiar with. Those who are students of animal sciences or parasitology would know, even the medical students would know how prevalent is ascariasis, hookworm disease, or even hydatidosis and neurocysticercosis in human populations. But besides these, there are number of infections which are very commonly found in populations of tropical world, including India. And of all these which are categorized under the class of Tramatoda, the flatworms, many of these are found in Indian populations as well. As I said, naturally, the reservoirs of infections occur in cattle or dogs or fish-eating animals, but they also cause concern to human health as well. Just a 2018 record from WHO indicates that liver fluke infections caused by Clonorchis sinensis or Chinese liver fluke and some very small trematode infections prevail in all low-income groups and along the tropical belt of the globe. Of these, the giant intestinal worm, which is commonly found in pigs, along with two other trematode flukes, which are more prevalent in neighboring countries like Singapore or Burma or Thailand, also are found in humans. Though the case reports of human infections of these organisms are very scanty from India. Fasciola species, most of the biology students would be familiar with the liver fluke. In European countries, though it is a very serious pathogen of human populations also, but in India, we do not have much records of this. The Chinese liver fluke, which occurs under different names in China and Southeast Asian countries, always caused through fish eating, is not prevalent in India, but a parallel species known as Opisthochus novarca we have reported from fish, the infective form, the metasaccharial stage occurring in fish tissues, has been reported in humans as well. The dicrocilium infection, again another kind of liver fluke, is passed on through ants which harbor the infective stage of the parasite. In all these, regarding all these worm infections, one thing is very common, that they have snails or mollusks as their first intermediate hosts. If there are no snails in the surroundings, there would be no infections of these kinds. Even the pancreatic worm has been reported as being zoonotic in certain parts. The minute heterophagus or metagonymous species are very prevalent in the neighboring Southeast Asia, but at least in India we are free from it. No human infections are reported, but only in animals, that too in pigs. There are many lesser known or rarely reported trematode infections that have been found to infect human subjects, but they are not very serious. Of the various fish parasitic forms reported, it is only one Clinostomum species which causes the disease yellow grub. And cases of Clinostomum occurring in many European countries make it shift to the category of potential zoonosis. Regarding the blood flukes also, though we do not have serious cases as occurring in the Middle East or Japan or in South American countries, but in India through cattle, cases of cercarial dermatitis as secondary zoonosis are prevalent, especially in areas where by profession people are involved in rice cultivation and also in moisture-rich tea garden states. The concern is of the emerging zoonosis caused by worms. I'm restricting my deliberation only to three most important trematode forms or flatworm forms which have been reported or have emerged as health concerns in the last 2 decades or so. And these are actually acquired, generated data from labs of basic scientists like us. These three important forms include lung infection by Paragonimus, or the disease called paragoniasis, echinostomiasis caused by gastrointestinal flukes, and strangely ocular parasitosis affecting eyes in human subjects. As far as Paragonimus species is concerned, the lung fluke, there are many species which are found mostly in the below the equator regions of the globe, mostly covering the tropical and subtropical environment. And the best known group of this genus, Paragonimus, appears as Paragonimus westmani, a human parasite that can undergo development in as many as 16 different snail species and 50 crustacean species. The development is not direct, that from host to environment and from environment to host. No, the life cycle implicates some tiny, lowly organized animals like snails or crustacea. All along the Southeast Asian border, in geographical terms, and also in South America, this infection is prevalent. In India, it is paradoxical that human infections have not been reported to a large extent, but the species was described way back in the 19th century from a Bengal tiger, which was shifted to Amsterdam Zoo. And since then, a number of names have been assigned to this form, and it appears that this lung fluke infection, regarding Indian scenario, does prevail in parts of Arunachal Pradesh, bordering China, and also in the northeastern states of Manipur and Nagaland as well. And the disease symptoms which resemble and mimic pulmonary tuberculosis. Many cases were being reported from Manipur in RIMS, that is Regional Institute of Medical Research in Imphal. There have been studies through getting, say, seropositive cases through immunodiagnosis. More than 200 or 300 cases have been diagnosed as positive for paragoniomasis. The disease, since was being ignored, taking it as tuberculosis, was not giving any clue for the relief of the people, because the infection is symptomatic, the disease is symptomatic, and the treatment based on redness in sputum is diagnosed. Now that we have many more clues, other things have followed, and there has been a lot of effort from the government side also to contain this. The other one that I wish to talk about is echinostomiasis, a neglected food-borne dermatodiasis. About 40 million people are affected globally by this infection. And in India, this is becoming an emerging public health concern, though it has been prevalent and is known mostly in Southeast Asian countries. If you see the distribution of this infection, you would find red stars almost in all continents. But again, it is a disease of the poor, low socioeconomic groups, and the tropical regions. The disease is primarily symptomized as diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, weight loss, and abdominal pain. And through our efforts, through surveys, extensive surveys, we have found that there are reports of 3 species implicated in this infection. Though many of the cases, they just are diagnosed as undetermined echinostomiasis cases. The infection, which is common in the rural areas of eastern UP, Bihar, West Bengal, and Orissa, is transmitted through consumption of the snail pila, which in common terms in local language we use as, we term as ghenga. Now in these affected areas, through surveys of local health facilities, during a 13-year study through Jubilee Hospital and Research Center in Sitamarhi, it emerged that about 178 cases of human subjects were rightly diagnosed due to this worm, 11 deaths, and the infected subjects were mostly below the age of 12 years. Now, in those tribal areas of which I am talking about, some places in Sitamarhi district, Hanuman Nagar and Purana especially, the common habit of people using raw snails under the belief that if children are fed on snails' mucus and tissue, they will gain strength. But it provides something else to them. Clinical symptoms of this disease include persistent diarrhea in more than 80% of cases, and vomiting, loss of appetite, and weakness is the most common feature. When we analyzed it at molecular level, it emerged that the species that we talk about is almost similar to the species that occurs in Thai populations. So they might be representing the same pathogenic agent under two different names. This study of ours has recently emerged in the Emerging Infectious Disease Journal that is published by CDC Atlanta. From not only humans in natural infections, this infection has been reported from pigs, cats, dog, civet, and mongoose as well. Now, the third and the most important is the disease emerging tracheostomiasis in South India. And it was noticed that subconjunctival and anterior chamber granulomas or granulomatous uveitis occurs in children of South India. For the past 40 years, especially the ophthalmologist from Aravind Eye Hospital in Madurai, they were concerned about the eye disease in children, but had no clue as to what it was happening. The areas where this granuloma uveitis was occurring mainly falls in the Kaveri Basin in Tamil Nadu area. And it was being identified as conglomerate tubercle, labeled as tuberculosis. But no patient ever responded to tuberculosis treatment, and there was loss of vision. For many years, right from 1993 till 2012, when ICMR supported projects also were handled, there were no clues regarding pointing out the role of tuberculosis in granuloma formation in these. When these Aravind Eye Hospital people organized camps, found out that the disease was prevalent in a large population of youngsters and adolescents, especially in one particular village where the villagers were using the village pond for various activities. So the clue drawn was that there's something wrong with the water of the ponds. In analysis, it was found that there were so many organisms, but no leads. The only lead they found was when they collaborated with the Eye Institute in Los Angeles and histopathologists from University of Washington. And the clue was that it is a suspected accidental infection due to a tramadol fluke. Their publications appeared in Ophthalmology and American Journal of Ophthalmology, but though in those infected waters, snails and other organisms were present, the researchers were clueless as to how to proceed. So again, they shook hands with collaborators, Zoological Society of India, Kolkata, identified the snails which harbored some larval stages. The larvae were identified through their collaboration with labs in China, but since the diagnostic agent had to be identified, they had no other way but to go in for molecular diagnostic work. And there we joined their team. Lots of cercariae were identified. The larval stages of the fluke were identified from the snail hosts, and when the granuloma tissue and that of the cercaria was put to DNA sequencing and analyzed, it emerged that the sequences were almost 100% similar between the granuloma and a particular fluke, which is hardly 1 millimeter in size and occurs as a very common parasite of fish-eating birds and mammals. And human infections can accidentally come in, that is intestinal. But the granuloma that we saw and analyzed was the cause of uveitis, in which the users of contaminated waters, they accidentally got infection through the cercaria larvae of the fluke, which since had entered an unnatural host, got immunologically restricted and turned into a granuloma form, a simple immunological response of the host. Epidemiologically, we know already that Brazil, Egypt, Sri Lanka, other than India, have this infection. So, based on the clinical signs, the outcome of the basic research resulted in translation of the whole findings from bench to bedside, and finally we could establish that it is not tuberculosis, but it is an intestinal worm, the larval stage of which, if accidentally approaching an unnatural host like human, can cause ocular parasitosis. Since then, that happened only in 2014 or 15. Since then, it has become so easy for the hospital people to diagnose the cases. No empirical anti-TB drugs are being given, and the easy solution to contain the disease or the infection is to educate the residents of those areas and to generate awareness among masses for simple hygiene and cleanliness. On global basis, there are many technological initiatives that are being taken, and they all, pertaining to all parasitic zoonotic diseases, they are all focused on 4 aspects, that is on genomics and functional genomics, immunology, transmission biology, and cost-effective diagnostic through globally coordinated program. As far as the parasitic infections, that too caused by trematodes or flatworms is concerned, in 2 tiers the program has been initiated. In the first tier, it is the lung fluke and the giant intestinal fluke that has been taken up, and in tier 2, it is the liver fluke, fasciola, other species of the lung fluke, paragonimus, and 2 species of echinostomid gastrointestinal forms have been taken. The carry-home message is simple, that though it is difficult to break or delink the age-old socio-cultural practices, or to bring about a sudden change in the economic factors of the people in endemic areas, but cultural practices, if changed with some caution, health education, social environment, and aggressive awareness programs in rural endemic areas in not only in India, in other areas also of the tropical world, definitely would produce long-term reductions in the disease-induced morbidity and mortality in the affected regions. I wish to acknowledge the efforts of the team of my own students, including basic biologists, molecular biologists, and also bioinformaticians, and a great support from the ophthalmology division of Arvind Eye Hospital, Dr. S.R. Rathnam, and for all those data generated through studies in Bihar. My thanks are due to Dr. Yugal K. Prasad, a physician working in that government hospital. Thank you very much.
We were already aware about the parasitic zoonosis, although it was considered common in some cases, especially the cysticercosis, hydrated disease, ascariasis, etc. She highlighted some emerging infections, especially the paragonimosis, echinocystosomiasis, and the trematodisis involving the eyes. And she also highlighted that large number of these cases are found reported from India now, and it is really a health concern for all of us. And she has given very interesting talk. If you have got any question, please you can ask.
I highly appreciate your very knowledgeable lecture. And I wish that there will be more audience to have the knowledge about this. I wanted to ask one question: why especially the ocular granuloma? Why not the other organs are affected by this?
The only thing is that the granuloma occurs due to invasion of the tailed larval stage of the parasite, and that stage is found in water when it is released from the snails. Now, in natural conditions, it would find out a suitable fish host, and in that it would undergo encystment and stay there in the fish muscle. And in turn, the fish-eating mammals or birds would acquire that infection, where the metasarcarial encysted stage would emerge and the juvenile would start its further development. But if the sarcaria does not find a suitable fish host and he hits the sarcarial stage, comes in contact with soft tissues of human, not skin. Skin may have some barriers. Conjunctiva is a soft point of entry. So the sarcaria manages to enter there in those contaminated waters where children are usually using for pleasure activities, swimming, bathing. And since it is unnatural habitat, there, due to immunological response, there would be delimiting effort of the tissue to just contain it in form of a cyst. So in a period of 2 to 3 weeks, that encapsulation activity continues and it emerges in form of, it is only subconjunctival, the cercaria is not able to penetrate deeper into the eyeball.
Thank you. Is this liver fluke infections can cause some sort of cancer also? Some pancreatic cancer or the bile duct?
Yes, it can, because the adult worm as such, which is present in the system, either in the liver tissue, in bile passages, or even in the pancreatic duct, that urethema type. As such, it does not cause much damage, except for mechanical abrasion of the tissue on which it feeds. But the eggs which are released in that environment, since they do not find a very easy way to come to the intestine, in due course of time, of course, they will come because they are released in feces. But that irritation, mechanical abrasion caused, continued mechanical abrasion caused due to the presence of the worm or their egg-laying activity may result in carcinomas conditions. And there are definite positive reports.
Thank you.
As you know, hepatitis is liver fluke, which uncommonly cause the cancer. Our Clonarchus sinensis, the Chinese liver fluke, is reportedly known to be associated with hepatocellular carcinoma. Now I will request Dr. Uttam, he is a neurologist, to give vote of thanks, or if you want to say anything about neurological manifestation of zoonosis, you can highlight it.
Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening us. As a neurologist, my knowledge was very limited to neurocystic sarcosis and hydatid cyst. But it was really an eye-opening lecture. And for me, I will go home and read about emerging zoonosis. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And now it's the time for felicitation. I request my teacher, Professor G.C. Upadhyay sir, to kindly felicitate our eminent speaker.
सर आप भी आएंगे, हमको तो लगा बैठे नजर आ रहे हो। क्या करो यार है ना, बड़ी फोटो लीजिएगा, सब लोग आ जाए, अब देर मत जाइए, और थोड़ा इधर वीडियो भी आना,
वीडियो भी आन दो,
वीडियो खर्चा बेकार किए थे,
बेकार किए थे, चेक कर गए पहले।